So education grants often look for people who have experience in the education field to help score the grants, because they want that voice from the industry to say, does this idea make sense? Is it doable?
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hi, good. How about you?
I am doing great. I'm really excited to hear about your story. When we first connected, I learned that you were working for the Boys and Girls Club of America. It's actually an organization that's near and dear to my heart. I have logged literally hundreds of hours at a local Boys and Girls Club when I volunteered while I was in college. So I am personally a huge fan of that organization. More so working with the kids was my background. So I can't wait to hear a little bit about what you are doing with the organization as far as grant writing. Before we get to that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your role in education and what you're doing now?
Sure. First of all, let me thank you for volunteering. That's such a big part of what we do, is having the community support us. So really appreciate that. Wherever you're located, if you've got one local to you, Orlando has a huge Boys and Girls Club, Central Florida, which is awesome. But yeah, so I started my education journey in a tiny little charter school here in my area of Florida, which is in the Tampa Bay area. And I worked there for several years as a social studies teacher. I was the only social studies teacher at such a tiny little school, 110 students, 6th through 8th grade. I taught all of them, cycled with them, obviously, because I was the only one. So it was kind of a great little situation. And all my kids went through there. And in 2020, as you know, the world just changed and we all went to virtual education for a while. I found that I enjoyed that. And so I made that transition in the summer of 2020 to virtual teaching full-time for K-12 or Stride. And I worked there as a middle school, 7th grade social studies teacher. And I used that time. I knew I was ready to make a transition in my career. I just wasn't sure what that transition was yet. And I also knew that I wanted to do remote work. So it was kind of a perfect transition period for me. I moved from brick and mortar to fully virtual and found that it really works for me. I like it a lot. It's a situation that allowed me to do what I love, but also gave me time back in my schedule, kind of gave me a little bit of my life back, because we know teaching can be all consuming sometimes. So I felt like it gave me a little bit of balance to sit and think about what's next for me. And I started kind of taking stock of, what do I enjoy? What are the tasks that I do every day that make me excited to do them? And I had a couple options, and I started to just kind of I didn't want to rush myself. I didn't want to kind of just go in a direction without really thinking it through and kind of taking a moment on that. And I had thought about going the instructional design route, which is still, I think, really an interesting thing. I'm the type of person that I want to do a little bit of everything. So this is why I didn't want to just rush into something, because I know myself, I could be happy doing 10 different things, but what's the next path for me? What's the right next path? So I also had done grant writing on a miniature scale before this and knew that it was something I enjoyed. To begin with, I started just as a teacher, writing for fellowships or different PD opportunities. And that's just the miniest version of this kind of work. But it gave me a sense of that I might enjoy this. So it was something in the back of my mind that said, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed helping others do that as well. So it kind of made me think that this might be a path I'd want to do. So it was one of those things. I'm like, well, this is one of the things I enjoy. This is one of the things I enjoy. Will I enjoy it as a profession? So I started by actually going in the back end. And since I wasn't sure if this is what I wanted to do, I thought, well, let me try it out in a way that kind of gets my feet wet, but not like a total transition. It lets me kind of try it out. And so I actually looked up grant reviewing because I had done a little bit of grant scoring for a lot of you are probably familiar with Fund for Teachers. And if you're not, definitely become familiar with them. I had written a proposal for them, and it took me a couple years, but a colleague and I did get accepted for that. We became fellows. And then after that, they asked you to help support the organization by scoring grants. And so I did that, and I was like, oh, well, maybe this is a way to see if I like the bigger process of this. So I looked up how to become a grant reviewer, and it's not a job per se, but it is kind of a very miniature side hustle, I guess you could call it, because it does pay, but it gives you an idea of what grant writers are looking for. So bigger grants like federal or state grants do tend to ask for grant reviewers from the industry that the grant pertains to. So education grants often look for people who have experience in the education field to help score the grants, because they want that voice from the industry to say, does this idea make sense? Is it doable? So I looked that up and just did some grant reviewing. I want to say, because it's been a little while since I did that, I want to say it paid like $150 for every like 15 that you scored. So you're grading like 15 grant proposals or pieces of them, and you get kind of a little stipend. By all means, it's not a job, but it was just something that allowed me to see what the process looked like from the finished end, to see if that was something that I thought I could handle, thought I might be interested in, and realized, hey, this is something that I could do that allows me to still support education because it's something I'm passionate about, and getting students the resources or the programming, the support that they need is important to me. But I was ready to move out of the classroom myself. So it just kind of allowed me to still be part of that. So that kind of led to me having discussions, and I feel like I'm just rolling with it. So if you want to stop me at any point, but it led me to kind of start talking to people and networking in the nonprofit world, because most grants are going to be for nonprofits. And that led me to talking with a colleague of mine who I had worked with at my brick and mortar school, who had transitioned over to the Boys and Girls Club in our county. And I was like, hey, if they ever need grant writing, I would love to start doing that. I've done a little bit of it. I've done some scoring, that kind of stuff, if they need anything. Well, it turns out they were at that point where they needed to move into having another person do that. They were getting kind of overwhelmed in that department. So it just kind of worked out with the networking for me. So that's kind of what got me here, I guess.
Okay. And I'm going to touch on a few points that you kind of just brought up, and then we'll keep going. I love everything that you're sharing. I'm sure the audience does as well. So don't forget, everyone that is joining us today, make sure you use the chat for any questions. But as we kind of jump into this, we will focus on the obviously grant writing aspect of this, but it actually kind of sounds like you made two transitions. One from your traditional teaching, you left that type of education setting and you worked for a kind of a for-profit organization that does that, like K-12 teaching virtually. So that was transition one. And that was almost like your bridge job. And we talk about bridge jobs a lot in the Teacher Career Transition Academy, when you don't quite have that long-term career, but you feel like, I need to get out of this situation because it's toxic, I'm overworked, like whatever it was. It sounds like your virtual teaching was your bridge job, kind of bought you time, a little bit more mental space, and then got you into where you are today. So I think, and I think for a lot of folks that are feeling burnout, and this might be you on the call today, but you went out of the classroom, maybe you even still love teaching and working with students. I think considering just doing virtual teaching may be an alternative that we don't always think about, because we think, oh, I'm burnout with teaching, but maybe it's the environment, or it's different aspects of teaching in a traditional setting. So I love that you shared that. So thank you for that. And if it's okay, well, the audience, you're welcome to ask questions about the virtual teaching experience as well. We can toss those in. So we're here for you today with your questions. So bring them in. Okay, I wanted to also get to Jackie's question from the chat. She is wondering what the starting point is. Do I need a certificate, or is there a class to upskill?
Yes, you don't need a certificate. Not all jobs require any additional. A lot of them are looking for good writing skills. So typically as teachers, we tend to have that. My other area of certification was ELA. So that was something I kind of have a background in as well. So they do want strong writing skills, obviously, because that's going to be the majority of what you do. You'd also want to have strong research skills, because a lot of grant writing is finding the data that you need or compiling that in a way that's going to tell a story. So you do not need a certificate, but there are certificates that you can get. I got one. Actually, this was post starting this job. In Tampa, there is a nonprofit leadership. They are a nonprofit, but their nonprofit is to support other nonprofits. There's a nonprofit leadership center, and they offer all kinds of classes on anything from grant writing to managing volunteers to the finance end of nonprofits to the management side of things. And it is such a great resource. Can't speak highly enough about my experience there, and I plan to do more with them. But I would assume that, Tampa is a fairly large metro area, but I would assume that in most metro areas you could find something similar to that. There are also online certificates that can be completed. And actually, I was looking just last week at a couple of those just to further myself as well, because there's different aspects to grant writing or fundraising. Fundraising is totally a different path, that if you're interested in kind of networking in the community, there's that end too. So there are certifications in that. And I can kind of think off the top of my head what that was. I'll try to look that up and see if I can find where I was before. But yeah, so it's not something you need to have, but it is definitely something that is helpful because it gives you an idea if you've not done this before, if you've never seen a federal grant before, which I honestly hadn't until I did one. My first one was for USDA, which we just got notification on Friday that we got. So my very first federal grant was a success. It took, I want to say that process was 6 months to hear back. Because I want to say my first federal grant went in maybe it's longer. It's longer than 6. My goodness, that took forever. The federal government, you know how they move. So yeah, that was my first one. So it was super exciting that one came back and was approved. And it was a very highly competitive one as well. So I was excited about that. But I had never seen a federal grant before. And that process is pretty intense. We just finished doing a couple of state grants to open new sites. And that just got approved on Friday too. We had a great day Friday. We were just getting approvals all over. I know, it was super exciting because those were two of the biggest things I've done. I've done a lot with smaller foundations, but these were massive multi-year projects that we'll have going. So they were super exciting to see that come through. But if you hadn't ever seen one before, it can be quite a lot to tackle. So some of those certificate classes definitely help kind of get your head around what do you need to go into this? What are reviewers looking for? And that's why being a reviewer ahead of time also helped me see, what does that end look like? What do they want to see? What kind of data, what kind of storytelling are they wanting from you? And I saw somebody ask, do I work mostly in the workplace or hybrid? I'm actually hybrid. And I think that's something we were going to chat about later. But I go in about 2 days a week typically. Otherwise, I'm at home. I could be fully remote. Honestly, like most of the stuff I do, even when I'm in the office, I'm just kind of doing on my own. But it is nice to, when, especially going into something completely different, it is nice to be able to be around the people doing the other parts of the job so that, I'm getting some of that information about what we have going on and what our programs are doing and the results of that. It does help to be around people, but the work itself, honestly, is something that's often in jobs that I've seen is often fully remote. So it can be any of those things.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Teacher Career Transition Academy. Our academy provides expert career coaching, professional resume and cover letter templates, small group coaching sessions, and a supportive peer network. The best way to jumpstart your career change journey is to enroll in my free Beyond the Classroom Masterclass. Visit teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass to enroll now. I'll also drop the link to register for free in the show notes of this episode. This free masterclass is sure to kickstart your journey or give you the boost you need to move the needle if you're already in the career change process. Enroll for free at teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass. As far as the upskilling, I know you had mentioned early on you were at a fairly small charter school and you had done some grant writing there, mainly for personal like PD things and maybe a few small things from the schools. I mean, a lot of times the school that you're currently employed at has people behind the scenes grant writing. And I know for a fact from my previous life, there are, larger districts and even mid-sized districts will have full-time employees as grant writers. So again, maybe it's a bridge job for you, or maybe it's a step to see if this is something you want to pursue for your full career. But, sometimes when you're thinking about, I want to get out of the classroom, there's often positions, even within your own district, that may be available to you that you didn't think of. And a grant writer at especially a mid or larger size district, those positions, do exist. They are full time. So it might be something to even consider and look at as well. We will get into why you're working hybrid when we get into the negotiation part of tonight. So I'll leave a little teaser with that. But let's dive into networking, because you had mentioned that, someone from your previous school had helped you kind of get in. Like, can you tell us that story and what was the flow and the timing of, how did you network? Did you have to go out and beg for a job? Like, how did that all work out for you?
So I was really actually very fortunate in this situation because the secretary at my charter, she had left. Actually, she left probably about 2020 as well. And in her transition to Boys and Girls Club, she went in the finance route. And so she's got amazing brain for finance. I think she could pretty much learn anything, honestly. But so she's done really well with that. And they were, it wasn't even something that she talked to me about. It was something that I was just like, I think this is the way I want to go with this. And if you guys needed anything, like I would be willing to do that on just an even like stipend or whatever. Just, I know you can't, because I volunteered as well. Like if you need a volunteer to do that, like I didn't know how that system worked at that point, but I was like, I just want to learn more about it. I want to see if this is the direction I want to go. Let them know if they need any support in that area, that I would love to be supported. And so she went back to the Boys and Girls Club and was talking about that and just said, hey, my previous colleague, we're good friends. She's looking to do this. And it was at a perfect time because, like I said, their department was getting so full of other tasks that, there's not just grant writing, there's grant reporting. Once you get the grant, there's a lot that goes into reporting what you've done with it. That's a whole separate job typically. So there's the grant management. So there's a ton of different pieces that go into making that whole department. And they were feeling a little flooded at that point. So it was a good time for them also to look at finding someone for that department. So I kind of, I guess, in a way, talked myself into a job. So I interviewed with them and we just talked about, what my experience had been, how I would approach this, and, what I had done as far as the reviewing and writing any of the smaller grants that I had written. And so being in the position that they were in, just bringing somebody in, they were in a good position to kind of start me without me having to have a ton of that background or experience. So it was kind of just a perfect kind of collision of things in my situation. And I'm the type of person that I just kind of keep an eye on like jobs that are out there. I'm not looking to change that job right now, but I do like to just see like what are the qualifications that should I want to move up, at some point. What are those things I would need? I just kind of like to have a pulse on that. And I do see several positions weekly that are open to people who don't have grant experience, but they do have writing experience. They do have research experience, and are willing to learn the process. So it's not something that you have to come in with that experience. There are obviously plenty of jobs where they want 1, 3, 5, whatever years of experience. So it's kind of one of those things that you can get started in the profession from the ground with a set of skills that you've taken from teaching and brought into that. So yeah.
I'd love to maybe jump in and just hear about like your day to day. So what does a typical day look like? Are you literally writing 24/7 while you're working? Like what's your schedule like? What's the flexibility like? And then, what are you doing day to day?
Yeah. So a lot of the grant writing process does not include just writing. It does include researching what grants are available. And there's a lot of great programs for that. You have to really look at what's going on in your organization and what is the need of the organization. What do we need to be focusing on right now? So I do have a lot of like strategy meetings, I guess you could call them, with different programs within our, or different projects, I guess you could say, within our program. And just looking at like, what do we need for this? What do we need for our preschools? What do we need for our before and after kids? What do we need for our teens? What do we need for family engagement, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of getting a pulse on what each of the areas needs, and then researching the grants that are looking to fund those things, because not every grant's going to be a good fit. So you want to make sure that your time is worth, it's put towards something that's worthwhile, that will likely have a good outcome for you. And especially where we are, so I'm in Hernando County. So I'm like at the very tip of Tampa Bay. In fact, we usually don't count as Tampa Bay for grant writing purposes. They like to lump us into like Ocala, or just forget about us entirely. So, so when you're in an area like I'm in, that's a lot smaller, that research becomes even more important, because if their focus is going towards urban areas, that doesn't apply to me. And I could spend 40 hours putting together a huge project for them, only to get a rejection a few months later because we aren't in their area. So researching and knowing what's a good opportunity for you and what aligns with what your program needs to do is probably a good 30% of what I do. It's just making sure that I have the ability to put together a proposal that stands a decent chance of being accepted. And then the writing obviously is probably the biggest chunk of that, but writing isn't just sitting down and typing something out. I'm working with the different programs to find out, like, what are you doing? What's working? What are your goals? What do you guys want to see accomplished, and how are you planning to do that? And that way I can tell a story, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing, is I'm writing the story of our nonprofit and what we have done and what we want to do in the future, and why we need that funding to help support that. So it's taking a lot of components from different parts of that nonprofit and combining them into a proposal. Each one is going to be, it's going to be different. So what I like to do is do a bunch of research ahead of time and find several that are a common theme, like maybe they are specifically focused on literacy, and that will help our before and after school students because we've got a whole program, a literacy program that we're working on that we want to expand. So I'll find several grants that we qualify for in that same theme, so that while I'm writing, I take the biggest one and write the full proposal out, and then use that as my template to, bless you, to write the smaller ones. And it just kind of gives me a nice workflow, so that what I'm working on that may take a big chunk of time it's useful in several different applications. So the majority of my day is just, kind of pulling all the pieces together, I guess you could say. Did I answer everything? I feel like there was maybe one other.
This is great.
Okay.
You're hitting a lot of the bullet points, and so much that we don't have a ton of questions yet coming in from the audience, but we're being very thorough today. Well, friends, that concludes part 1 of this teacher career transition story. But there's a lot more valuable information coming your way in part 2 that you don't want to miss. So check out our channel for part 2. And remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.